April 17, 2019. 12:22 a.m. Flight 9W2502 from Amritsar touches down in Mumbai. The doors open, passengers walk out, and then, nothing. No announcements, no crew change, no next flight. Because there is no next flight. Jet Airways, India's oldest private airline, just died. 124 planes grounded overnight. 20,000 workers suddenly jobless. $4 billion in debt. And this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a 5-year fight to bring the airline back from the dead, a fight that cost $1.8 billion more and still ended in failure. Why should you care about a bankrupt airline from a country you might not live in? Because India is the world's fastest growing aviation market. In 2023, over 150 million passengers flew domestic. Boeing and Airbus are betting billions that India will need 2,000 new planes by 2040. But here's the problem: the way Jet Airways died, and failed to revive, exposed a rot that still threatens every airline in India today. The collapse wasn't just bad luck. It was a slow-motion disaster caused by reckless debt, a stubborn founder, and a legal system that couldn't decide if a dead airline should stay dead or be resurrected. And the revival attempt? It became a cautionary tale of broken promises, regulatory gridlock, and billions of dollars burned for nothing. You see, Jet Airways was more than an airline. It was a symbol of India's economic rise. When it shut down, 20,000 families lost their income. Pilots who had flown for 25 years were suddenly begging for jobs. And the passengers? They were stranded, forced to pay triple on other airlines. The Indian government watched, helpless, as a private company collapsed under its own weight. But the real horror came later, a so-called revival that raised hopes, then crushed them again. The new owners promised to pay $200 million. They paid $20 million. They promised to rehire employees. They didn't. They promised flights by 2022. It's 2024, and the airline is being liquidated. This is the story of how a $1.8 billion ghost fleet became the biggest failure in Indian aviation history, and why it could happen again. Let's rewind to 1993. India's skies were still dominated by government-owned Air India and Indian Airlines. But a travel agent named Naresh Goyal had a dream, a private airline that would treat passengers like kings. With just 4 leased Boeing 737s, Jet Airways took off on May 5, 1993. Within a decade, it became India's largest private carrier. By 2005, Jet Airways had 42 planes, flew to international destinations like London and Singapore, and launched a successful IPO that valued the company at over $2 billion. Its service was legendary: hot meals on domestic flights, real cutlery, and a smile that felt genuine. Business travelers loved it. But Goyal's ambition didn't stop there. In 2007, he made a fatal mistake. He bought Air Sahara, a struggling full-service airline, for $340 million, renaming it Jet Light. The acquisition was overpriced, the integration was a mess, and it loaded Jet with debt it could never repay. Meanwhile, the landscape was shifting. Low-cost carriers like Indigo arrived with a ruthless model: one type of plane, no frills, rock-bottom fares. Jet Airways tried to compete by launching its own low-cost arm, Jet Connect, but it was too little, too late. By 2010, Indigo overtook Jet as India's largest airline by market share. Jet's debt ballooned to over $1 billion, and its operating costs were the highest in the industry. Fuel prices spiked in 2012 and 2018, the rupee crashed, and every dollar of debt became more expensive. Goyal, who controlled the board, refused to cut costs or dilute his stake. He kept borrowing to keep the airline flying, hoping for a miracle. The miracle never came. In August 2018, Jet Airways defaulted on lease payments for the first time. Lessors began repossessing planes. By March 2019, more than 50 aircraft were grounded for non-payment. The airline was bleeding $3 million a day. Goyal scrambled for a bailout, from banks, from the government, even from rival airlines. But no one came. On March 25, 2019, Goyal and his wife stepped down from the board, handing control to a consortium of lenders led by State Bank of India. The lenders promised to find a buyer and restart operations. they never did. On April 17, 2019, Jet Airways suspended all flights. The proud airline that once carried 600 flights a day was now a memory. But the story doesn't end there. Because in India, death is never final, especially for a company with valuable airport slots and a flying license. Jet Airways entered insolvency under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Creditors claimed over $1.8 billion. The resolution process was a circus. First, no bidders came. Then, a Russian consortium showed interest but vanished. Finally, in 2020, a surprising winner emerged, the Jalan-Kalrock consortium, led by UAE-based businessman Murari Lal Jalan and UK-based Kalrock Capital. They promised to pay creditors $200 million and invest another $100 million to revive the airline. Employees who had been unpaid for months were ecstatic. The National Company Law Tribunal approved the plan in June 2021. Jet Airways was coming back. Or so they thought. What followed was a masterclass in how not to revive a company. JKC paid a mere $20 million upfront, 10% of what they promised, and then stalled. They demanded control of the airline before paying the rest. The lenders refused. The case bounced between NCLT, NCLAT, and the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA, refused to reissue Jet's flying license because JKC hadn't paid Employee Provident Fund dues or settled lessor claims. The airport slots that made Jet valuable were reallocated to other airlines. JKC kept issuing press releases promising imminent flights, but no plane ever took off. In 2023, JKC claimed they had paid another $50 million, but the lenders disputed it. The final nail came in November 2024, when the Supreme Court of India ruled that the revival plan had failed and ordered Jet Airways to be liquidated. The airline's remaining assets, a few old planes, some office furniture, and a brand name once worth billions, will be sold to pay creditors pennies on the dollar. For the 20,000 former employees, many of whom are still owed years of back wages, it was a bitter end to a 5-year hope. Today, Jet Airways exists only in memories and court filings. Naresh Goyal, once a billionaire, is fighting money laundering charges. He spent months in jail before getting bail. The revival failed because of greed, incompetence, and a regulatory system that couldn't force a buyer to keep its promises. The lesson? A brand is worthless without cash and commitment. And in India's cutthroat aviation market, there is no room for second chances. As new airlines rise and fall, Jet Airways stands as a $1.8 billion warning. If you build an empire on debt and ego, it will eventually crash, and this time, there's no revival. If this story made you angry, good. It should. The fall of Jet Airways isn't just about one company, it's about the fragile nature of success and the brutal reality of business failure. If you want more deep dives into the companies that shaped our world, and the ones that crashed, hit that subscribe button right now. I release a new documentary every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Speaking of crashes, ever heard of Go First? An Indian airline that went from 50 daily flights to 0 in just 48 hours? It's a story of engine failures, Pratt & Whitney lawsuits, and a collapse that's still unraveling. Click the video on your screen to watch it next. And if you think Jet Airways deserved better, let me know in the comments. I read every one. See you in the next one.